Each came to the Acropolis to compete for the patronage of the city, the outcome to be decided by the inhabitants. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and up popped a spring. Athena struck the ground with her spear, and up came an olive tree, which not only suggested sustenance for the Greeks, but a possible outlet for a commercial venue. Thus, Athena became the patron goddess of the city. Over the centuries, there were several temples to Athena, most of them destroyed. But we leave it to Pericles to give the world the most remarkable piece of architecture in all of Greek antiquity, the Parthenon.
Pericles decided to rebuild the Parthenon on the Acropolis, using the crumbling foundations of an older Athenian temple. It would take thousands of laborers and skilled craftsmen to create this magnificent temple, and it would cost more than any building the Greeks had ever engineered, 30 million drachmas. In our terms, billions of dollars.
That's an amazing amount, but keep in mind that was a huge state enterprise.
Construction on the gargantuan building project began in 447 BC. The Parthenon was to be about 2/3 the length of a football field. Its outer dimensions, 228 feet long by 101 feet wide. The first challenge was to cleave the marble from a mountain quarry 10 miles away. In all, about 30,000 tons of the fine white stone would be needed. In the quarry, workers used the natural cracks of the stone to separate giant marble slabs from the mountainside.
The first step is to locate these cracks and calculate if this piece of marble is sufficient for my specific purpose. The second step is to put within these cracks both horizontal cracks and vertical cracks, wedges, iron wedges. Why? Because an enormous energy was given by hammering all these wedges simultaneously, so that the brittleness of the material makes further cracking.
Once the giant slabs were ready, gangs of men used levers, ropes, and pulleys to maneuver the marble and prepare the stone for transportation to the Acropolis. But accidents often happened.
There was an enormous risk that this big block would slide further on, killing people underneath.
But cutting and transporting the marble from the side of the mountain was only half the battle in the construction of the Parthenon. Engineers now had to answer the question of how to lift these 10-ton marble behemoths and erect the greatest temple the world had ever seen.
No medals were awarded in the ancient Olympics. A winner received an olive wreath on his head.
July 447 BC. Construction began on a magnificent temple on the Athenian Acropolis. The Parthenon was the vision of Pericles, a dynamic and ambitious leader who would take Athens into a golden age never before seen in ancient Greece.
It was a statement. We are the most powerful city. We are the cauldron of democracy and free thinking. We have the best people, we have the best army, the best navy. We are the leaders.
The Parthenon would differ from most temples of the day, which consisted of a hexa-style construction, featuring 6 columns on one end and 13 on the side. The Parthenon would be a larger octa-style, with 8 by 17 columns.
That makes the building very different because they all have basically the same proportions. When you make them larger, you simply scale up everything. To make it wider was to give it an extra dimension.
The columns provide the main support for the structure. Each column consisted of 11 separate drums, stacked one on top of the other like checkers. They were carved so that they would perfectly fit when laid together in a column. To do this, the top of each drum was divided into 4 concentric circles, with each ring either smoothed or roughed out, depending on the amount of grip needed to interlock with the next drum. In the center of each drum, masons cut a rectangular notch measuring about 4 to 6 inches square and 3 to 4 inches deep. Carpenters then inserted wooden plugs into the notches, which served to align and center each drum with the one above it. The next challenge was in lifting the enormously heavy drums, especially those for the upper sections of the columns. A single column of the Parthenon could weigh between 63 and 119 tons.
A crane is an extremely simple device. You have just a boom, and then you have a series of pulleys, which, as we know, just give you the possibility of taking up a weight of, say, 10 tons by pulling down only 100 kilos.
Engineers attach the stone to the crane in one of several ways. The method most often used was to tie the end of the rope to the top part of a metal S-hook, fasten shorter ropes to the bottom of the hook, and then loop these around small protruding knobs called bosses that had been left uncut from the marble for this very purpose. Typically, 4 bosses would be left surrounding the drum or stone block, evenly distributing the force needed to hoist the object. The walls enclosing interior spaces had to be laid down with extreme precision, since the builders did not use mortar. To hold the ends of each block together, builders hollowed out the ends in a double T design. Then iron rods were inserted to clamp them together. After the columns and blocks were put in place, the bosses used to lift them were chipped off and smoothed over.
There's a saying that there are no straight lines in the Parthenon. And what's meant by this is that the architects incorporated a series of sort of optical illusions when they built it. It starts with the stairs, goes up through the columns, all the way up to the top of the building and the pediment, that triangular element at the top. So let's take a look at the stairs. They seem to be straight, but no, closer look, they bow in the center and they go back down at the end. Now this conceit, if you will, continues right up to the columns. This column is of the Doric order. There's no base. It seems to grow right up out of the stone. Each column has 20 flutes, which makes the column sort of undulate as you look around it. And then the column bows out in the center and bows back up at the top. This is a process called entasis.
Such long lines, which are more or less at the level of your horizon, tend to curve. So in order to extinguish this effect, they curve them the other way. So the result, again, is more harmonious, and you see it as being straight. Because if it was all straight, perfect, right angles, then you will see it like that.
The Parthenon's main function was to provide shelter for the monumental statue of Athena.
Parthenon was an extremely expensive building, but the statue inside of it was almost equal in cost to the building itself, if not even more expensive.
Athena's statue was about 10, 11 meters high. That means 32, 35 feet or so. And it was of the materials gold and ivory.
Hundreds of sculptors created lifelike figures that proved the craftsmanship wasn't simply in the engineering. The most famous carving in the decoration of the temple is the frieze running on the interior walls of the Parthenon. It was carved in a low relief, just inches off the stone, and depicts the Panathenaea, a celebration to the goddess Athena held in Athens every 4 years.
What survives on the side of the Parthenon today are the white marble remains of the building. In antiquity, not only the sculptures, but also many other parts of the building were richly decorated with paint.
But not every citizen was enthralled by the Parthenon. Some saw Pericles' pet project as an Athenian eyesore and simply a monument to his own glory.
Now, many Athenians hated the Parthenon, the temples. They thought it was disgusting. They thought it was terrible. Plato didn't like it at all. For many Athenians, when they saw in their holiest of holies, if you like, those new buildings coming up, buildings that had incorporated novelties, buildings that were making a break from the past.
The whispers of discontent in Athens weren't limited to the Parthenon. As Pericles continued to expand Athens' domination, his rivals began to conspire against him. Soon they lashed out and attacked his close associates. At the top of the list was an elegant and educated woman named Aspasia, a member of the elite Hetairae social caste and Pericles' consort.
The Hetairae were high-class courtesans, often compared, for example, to geishas in Japanese culture. Hetairae moved in the top circles in Athenian and Greek cultural life.
In classical Athens, a woman's role lay under the dominion of men, but Aspasia was the exception to the rule. Pericles treated Aspasia as an equal, and his consort quickly became part of the Athenian elite.
But they became a well-known couple, and to the sort of astonishment and some scandal of the Athenian people, Pericles was even to be seen actually kissing Aspasia publicly. And of course, public displays of affection were not anything that one expected to see in classical Athens.
By 432, after nearly 15 years of construction, the Parthenon was completed. This temple to Athena did just what Pericles wanted. It advertised the power of Athens to the world. Ironically, the supremacy the Parthenon symbolized was already waning, and Athens' longtime enemy Sparta was on the rise.
Once Athens had established this great alliance system, or as some people put it, this Athenian empire, and arguably that's what it became, the Spartans began more and more to look askance, as it were, at the Athenians, and eventually, by the 430s, to feel threatened by the Athenians.
In 431 BC, Sparta moved on Athens. For 2 long years, Athens held out against the Spartan siege. But Pericles' shining city was about to come under attack by an invisible enemy.
After a couple of years, because of the overcrowding in the city of Athens, disease that seems to have come originally from the Near East attacked the Athenian people. It's known as the Great Athenian Plague. Large numbers of Athenians died in this plague.
Pericles, now in his early 60s, survived the plague, but was physically weakened and bore the brunt of the blame for the city's misfortune. In 429, with plague and war overshadowing his beloved city, Pericles died. The bloody and brutal conflict between Athens and Sparta, known as the Peloponnesian War, continued for another 25 years, until finally in 404 BC, Athens fell.
With the end of the Peloponnesian War, the time of Pericles and the dominance of Athens was over. Great marvels of Greek culture and Greek engineering would live on. And the irony was that the 2 men, the 2 purveyors of the fantastic legacy of classical age of Athens, were not Athenians at all.